I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Look! Up in the sky! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superboy? Yep, that's right, folks. From 1988 to 1992, the Boy of Steel had his own TV show. 4 whole seasons full of action, adventure, romance, and for its time, some pretty good special effects. Yeah, they don't hold up to today's standards, but back then they were super impressive. Pun intended. But why does this show only have a small cult following? Why haven't more people heard about this show? Why did it take 14 years to get a proper DVD release? Why did it get canceled? And more importantly, why should it come back? Let's find out. This is Gone, but Not Forgotten. Superboy, or The Adventures of Superboy as it was later renamed, was the brainchild of Alexander and Ilya Salkind. You know, the producers who brought us the iconic 1978 Christopher Reeves Superman movie, the impressive yet flawed Superman 2, and...
How you doing there, Gus?
Please don't talk to me. I'm having enough trouble just hanging on.
I've come here to search for the Omega Hedron. It's a power source vital to Argo City.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. So let us find out, where does Superboy succeed, where Supergirl and Superman 3 fail? Superboy began when it premiered in 1988 in syndication, and its first season was garbage. It was so bad. And there are a lot of reasons why, but I can sum them up in 3. First off, the budget. The showrunners wanted to ensure that the show kept going as long as possible, so in order to do that, they kept costs at a minimum, which caused these special effects to look pretty crappy. Number 2, the stories just weren't very good. Superboy mostly fought mercenaries, drug dealers, and gangsters, but it wasn't until later in the season that he started having more formidable villains, like Mixie, and racist aliens.
There's no need to shout, mister.
Superboy, he'll kill you!
Eventually, I'll kill them all.
And third, and there is no easy way to say this, but the original actor they chose to play Superboy, John Haymes Newton, just wasn't very good. He wasn't bad per se, but he was pretty dull. Here are just a few examples.
I'm called Superboy. I fight for truth, justice, and the American way.
Mr. Millie, come on, think about it. What did they say?
She's dead too.
Still, there was one highlight in season 1, and that's when we had an award-winning guest star. That's right, Joaquin Phoenix. You know, that clown that won that Oscar. But instead of being thrown into a vat of chemicals and turning into the clown prince of crime, he gets thrown into a dumpster and becomes... the scourge of every bully, the avenger of every geek across the world. It's the mother of dragons. It's a TIE fighter. No, it's Super Geek. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's Super Geek. Strange visitor from the peculiar world named Comic-Con, who came to school to have his lunch money taken. Super Geek, disguised as needy child actor Joaquin Phoenix. Super Geek, who is... oh my god, he is melting that man! Dear Lord, someone call the police! He is melting that human being! Run for your lives! The show completely changed in season 2, and those changes started with the cast. Only one actor survived the season 1 overhaul, and that was the gorgeous Stacy Haiduk. My god, I was so in love with this girl as a tween. Haiduk's portrayal of Lana Lang was great and all, but I felt she slowly began to be modeled after a Lois Lane type of character. Back in season 1, even though it was a flawed season, she was clearly in love with both Clark and Superboy, while in the later seasons, it was just Superboy. But the one decision that changed the show completely was when Gerard Christopher was cast as Superboy. Christopher embodied everything we wanted in the character. He was noble, kind, and smart. Frankly, without Gerald, I don't think that this show would have survived past the second season. I only have one issue with his performance, and that's his portrayal as Clark Kent. I felt that he played Clark like a geeky stereotype. While I didn't like Newton's performance in season 1, I did appreciate his Clark Kent, which he played as a regular guy. while Gerald...
I found this really amazing bug on the way here, and I just had to stop and catch it for my bug collection.
Season 2 was a pure dedication toward the Silver Age of comic books, which featured villains that had never appeared on TV, straight from the comic books. And this was mostly due to the fact that a lot of the writers also worked in the comic book industry, like Denny O'Neil and J.M. DeMatteis. So we got to see new villains, like Metallo and Yellow Perry. But the best villain that the show ever had was actually a villain that was recast, Lex Luthor. Originally, Scott James Wells portrayed him, but to be honest with you, he was not the best actor.
It took a superhuman effort, but I have 2 tickets to the...
Lex, just keep your clammy hands off, okay?
Leo, she's going to regret that. Nobody talks to the president of the senior class that way. Nobody!
So in Season 2, Sherman Howard was the one that was cast as Lex Luthor. And my god, he was brilliant. He played Lex like an insane, brilliant, mad scientist. You just wanted more of him in every episode that he was in. And you always wondered what he was gonna do next. You know, Jesse Eisenberg gets a lot of hate for playing Lex like a flamboyant villain. But I think if he had seen Howard's portrayal, it would have gone quite differently, in my opinion. Just take a look at Sherman's brilliant work here as Lex Luthor.
No, wait, no, please. Please don't do it yet. Oh, no, please. Please, I don't want to die. Oh, God, no, please, no.
Gotcha.
Now, there are a lot of great episodes in Season 2, but if I had to pick one, it would actually be a 2-parter under the titles of Bizarro, the Thing of Steel, and Battle with Bizarro. This story is definitely a tribute to the Silver Age of comics, as it mirrors the first appearance of Bizarro in the pages of Superboy issue 68, first published in 1958. Now the story is pretty basic. A scientist friend of Superboy creates a duplicating ray in order to solve world hunger. Unfortunately, the ray is defective, so sadly anything he tries to duplicate comes out as a flawed replica. There's a freak accident, Superboy gets hit by the duplication ray, and creates Bizarro, the imperfect copy of the Boy of Steel. Bizarro goes out and gets shunned by the public. He kidnaps Lana and fights Superboy. And at the end he realizes that he is not a monster and flies off into space. So at first glance, this looks like a straightforward and plain episode. But I disagree, as there's a lot of cool things which happen in this story. There's a lot of funny moments, such as this scene in the episode where Bizarro decides that the reason people are scared of him is because he's not wearing a disguise. So he goes into a store and dresses up like Clark Kent, or as he likes to call himself, Kent Clark. He then wanders into Clark's college and winds up going to a costume party that Clark had decided not to go to with Lana as his date. So when Bizarro shows up at the party and Lana sees him, she immediately thinks that Clark is making fun of her. She gets angry and leaves the party, and Bizarro chases after her because he decides that he is now in love with her. Now, one of the goofiest moments that I love here the most is when Bizarro decides to change into his costume in a phone booth. It's also pretty insane that Lana thinks Clark is wearing a Bizarro costume at this party. And even after Bizarro flies in and kidnaps her, she still does not put 2 and 2 together. But aside from the funny moments, this episode also explores some interesting themes, like what is it to be human, what is it to be alive, and what is it to be family. It's an excellent episode, which I highly recommend that you watch. For seasons 3 and 4, the show would be completely revamped. This time it had more of a film noir look, and the stories were more mature, which was reminiscent of what Batman the Animated Series would be years later. Sure, these episodes had action, but they also had a lot of dark themes. For example, there was an episode where Superboy was led to believe that he killed someone, and was so racked with grief that he almost hung up his cape. And another episode saw him getting tempted by the devil to kill an implied rapist. So yeah, seasons 3 and 4 were complete game changers for the entire series, with Lana and Clark now working as interns at a government agency named the Bureau of Extra Normal Matters. Now you're probably wondering to yourself, man, that name sounds kinda familiar. Well, let me give you a hint as to why.
Welcome to the DEO, the Department of Extra Normal Operations.
You heard right, folks. Before the DEO's first appearance in Batman issue 550 from 1998, And before being established in the Supergirl TV show in 2015, the beta version of the DEO, the Bureau of Extranormal Matters, was the agency established to investigate alien activity. Also, before you compare it to the X-Files, keep in mind that show premiered in 1993, while this was 1991. So it predates that as well. In fact, it's pretty strange that a lot of what was featured in the show predates things that would later be featured in comics, TV, and movies. For example, one of the best episodes of Season 3 is the two-parter Roads Not Taken. In the episode, Lex Luthor falls through a portal meant to study alternate dimensions, or rather meant to study the multiverse. Superboy follows him through this portal and winds up on an Earth, where that Earth's Superboy murdered his Lex Luthor in a fit of rage. The interesting part is when we meet that world's Superboy, who bears a striking resemblance to a Superboy we all know and love. That's right, none other than Con-El, otherwise known as Connor Kent, who'd first appear in Superman issue 500 in 1993. That's 2 whole years after this episode first aired. The next Earth that Superboy visits is an Earth where his evil counterpart has taken over the world, and people worship him like a god while actually wearing armbands with the crest of the House of El on them. Just like a little movie that premiered in theaters 25 years later called Batman vs. Superman. As for our 4th and final season, it had some pretty cool episodes as well, such as the Twilight Zone-like episode Paranoia, that actually guest starred Noel Neill and Jack Larson, aka the Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen from the Adventures of Superman 50s TV show starring George Reeves. Plus, Season 4 actually features my favorite episode of the entire series, Know Thine Enemy. In this episode, Lex has decided to blow up the world after learning that his sister Lena Luthor, the only person he has ever loved, has died. So in order to stop him, Superboy plugs his brain into Lex's virtual reality computer and begins to live out Luthor's childhood, causing Superboy to slowly go mad as he experiences the abuse Lex lived through as a child. It's an incredible episode, as it poses the question of whether people are turned evil by their environment or whether they're just born evil. So, why did this series end? 3 words: Lois and Clark. It was around this time that ABC decided that they wanted to make their own Superman series. And well, we all know how rebooting a universe turned out for Superboy. Fun fact though, Gerard Christopher actually auditioned for Lois and Clark, and was even offered the Superman part at the end of the audition. But when one of the producers looked at his resume and saw that he had previously donned the red cape, the producer said, and I quote, "We want someone who's new and fresh. Someone who hasn't acted a lot." Well, just take a look at what that chosen actor has done. Yeah, the Oscars will not be calling out his name anytime soon. Now, why should this show come back? Well, to be frank, we owe it a huge debt. Superboy broke new ground, and without its contribution, we probably wouldn't have half, or even any, of the DC shows we have today. Which is why it's so upsetting that during that Crisis of Infinite Earths event, there was no Superboy cameo. I mean, hell, we had a Birds of Prey cameo. Again, Birds of Prey. Really? I mean, imagine what those characters would look like today. That would be amazing. So why have only a select few heard of this show? Well, I blame the availability. Due to legal issues, the series had no reruns broadcast on any television network, and it never had a VHS release. However, it was finally released in 2006 on DVD with special features. The first season, that is. And I think you all know about the quality of that first season. So the sales of that DVD tanked, and if it wasn't for the passion of the cult following, Warner Brothers wouldn't have released the rest of the seasons in 2012 and 2013. No special features, of course, but beggars can't be choosers. So if you're interested in watching this show, you can buy the DVDs on Amazon. And best of all, the entire series is now streaming on the DC Universe streaming service. So enjoy Superboy for yourself. Just make sure you don't watch that first season.
I'm called Superboy. I fight for truth, justice, and the American way.
Ugh, God, that's bad.